Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another Chamber and Cat TV telecast. We're trying to do these weekly. Hopefully you were able to watch the one earlier in the week with Dr. Trey Dobson and Tom D from the healthcare facility. We're back on Zoom. We have to give a big thank you to Cat TV and their staff, whether it's in studio or using the platform Zoom. We're able to broadcast live, and so we still appreciate them. As we're broadcasting live, many of you may be watching this on Facebook right now. If you have questions for our guests today, please feel free to leave a comment in the comment box, and both the Cat TV studio as well as I will be monitoring that. As I've said to most, when you tune in, don't watch so much me. I got notes here, and I'm looking at Facebook to monitor comments. Our guest is the subject matter expert today. And so let's get right to that. I want to welcome Shannon Prescott here from the Richards Group. Shannon is a certificate work comp advisor, certified occupational safety specialist. We'll get into what all that means soon, but really a program coordinator for the Richards Group. And of course, the Richards Group, a member of this chamber, is a full service insurance and financial service firm that provides comprehensive risk management, employee benefits, and investment services. We've used them often when we're talking about the healthcare issues and when we were offering healthcare. So we're good friends with the Richards Group, both in Bennington and out in Manchester, and of course up throughout Vermont as well. Shannon, let's get into some of why we're here and why we have you here today. Effective on April 24th, Vermont employers were required to complete a mandatory training. Governor Scott released his Work Smart and Stay Safe Restart Vermont Phase 2. Included in the addendum are the health and safety requirements, which we've been talking about for the last week at least. Training requirements, customer and general public mask use, phase restart. We saw farmers markets come online last week. We just heard that golf and some outdoor recreation was increasing, as well as manufacturing and construction workers. The most pressing of the information include a requirement by all Vermont businesses, nonprofit, and government entities to complete and document mandatory health and safety training by May 4th. We're obviously past May 4th, so we'll talk a little bit about what that means for people. But let's talk, I think first and foremost, as an insurance company, as the Richards Group, I think there's some general questions I have for you. I want to spend a bulk of today on that VOSHA training that every Vermont business is going to have to go through. You've done some of the webinars. I've seen some of the webinars. I think they're terrific. And what's the difference between doing the VOSHA webinar versus using the Richards Group webinar? But first, let's talk a little bit about what your main role is at the Richards Group. I gave you some of the titles there, but what have you been working on in your career?
So what does that all mean? Well, first and foremost, my job is to assist our commercial lines clients on their work comp programs and employee safety programs. So that's the bulk of what I do. I'm also the safety director for Richards Group, so I oversee our safety program for I think we're at about 130 something employees at this point. So that's a big job too. And we, as an employer, had to complete this mandatory training as well. So it was something that we could easily offer out to the public at large and just try to get as many people trained as possible. And so that's my last few weeks have been solely around helping employers put together basically infectious disease control plans. That's been my life since about March. So,
well, we appreciate all the work that you are doing. It's funny, or not funny. It's just as certain subject matter experts, I think maybe a couple of weeks ago, we may not have even been thinking about this. We were just trying to handle the crisis at hand and really close down businesses. And now as businesses, and this will happen throughout the next couple of weeks, more and more will be able to turn back on. Your role is crucial, it sounds.
Yeah, it's been an uptick for sure in the last few weeks as people are starting to reopen. And there are things to think about that around those as they are bringing employees back, and maybe there's been some changes. And so while the insurance and the coverage side of things is not necessarily my wheelhouse, I work with team members that are experts in that on that side. Why we have really good, effective teams. I do safety and compliance, and they make sure you're covered. But I do know enough to be dangerous. So some things that employers should be thinking about are, did you adjust your payrolls when you put people on furlough or laid them off, and are you bringing those back? So let's think about that because insurance coverage, a lot of those things based off of your payroll. There's things to think about on a liability side as well. Following protocols that Vermont has put out, especially the structured training, would be important, not just for your employees, but the liability of the public now coming in and interacting with you. So there should be controls in place for those as well. And so making sure that you have good liability policies, and will this even be covered because it is related to a pandemic? Those are discussions people should be having with their agents right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we've encouraged our business members, you should have called your vendors. You should be calling your insurance brokers even in the beginning. And I think to Shannon's point, maybe it's time for a second call to say, okay, we're exploring welcoming both staff and the public back in. What does that look like? And that's really where the webinar comes in, Shannon. So maybe give us a little overview of how that, you said you had to produce some safety even for the Richards Group internally. So where did this kind of webinar come out of? And maybe go back a little bit in terms of VOSHA. I've heard you say often, and I think it's probably common for our businesses, which are a lot of small businesses probably have never had to deal with VOSHA or OSHA before. So give us a real kind of ground level view or overview of those organizations, and then how does the webinar kind of weave in there?
Sure. So OSHA is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and it was formed in 1970. And that was, that's not true. Technically 1971, the administration was formed.
We won't hold you to
Don't
it.
fact check me. So it was actually written into law. The OSH Act was written into law in 1970 by President Nixon, just for some fun trivia for you. And then the agency was created from that act. And so the agency is there to oversee the law, as employers have to keep their employees safe while at work. So they have to keep it free from known and recognized hazards. And that's very OSHA speak. So what does that mean? Sometimes they write rules and regulations and guidelines around a specific hazard that we know is a common hazard for a specific industry, and we have to follow those guidelines. Sometimes they don't have a specific guideline, but they identify something as a hazard like COVID-19 and then set forth some guidelines that make it mandatory for employers to follow to keep their employees safe. Vermont has, and every state has the right to do this, they have chosen to take on a state agency, OSHA. So that's where we get Vermont OSHA or VOSHA. And so it's very similar to federal OSHA, and this was the original intent of the OSHA agency, was to have states adopt it and make it better. So we have the federal minimum guidelines, and then states adopt those and either improve upon them, make them more restrictive, like our friends in California love to do. We see that coming a lot from them. Vermont does it as well. And so this is a case with this mandatory training where Vermont has really taken the OSHA guidance on the federal level and made it mandatory and added a few more pieces to it. And that's what the VOSHA training is really all about.
So as you know, that kind of got us up to present day March with probably some blips on the screen for other contagions and mild outbreaks that we've had. Obviously, COVID has got a whole different type of crisis, which has affected really every plane of people interacting and being together, whether it's personal, family, social, business, economic. With that in mind, many businesses, perhaps that have never used VOSHA or even understand exactly what it was all about, now have an extreme amount, sounds like, probably for small businesses, new requirements to follow. So what are some of those requirements that we're seeing coming out from VOSHA?
So what OSHA and VOSHA love to do is align with other agencies and say they've come up with a really good set of guidelines for employers, so we're going to follow them. They're not going to try to recreate the wheel. So in this case, as we know, federal OSHA is pointing to the CDC guidelines for employers, which are pretty pretty reasonable and easy to kind of work your way through. They're putting a lot of industry information out there, but I think kind of losing my train of thought there with my questions. I think the most important thing is that you take a look at the mandates that Vermont is putting out there specifically. And so they made these CDC guidelines. I found my track back. They made these CDC guidelines mandatory here in Vermont and then added a few more things. So instead of strongly suggesting employees need to wear masks at work now they're required to wear cloth masks at work. And what the statement is in the presence of others. And that's one of the biggest questions that I've gotten is, well, what does that mean in the presence of others? And so think you might have a large room with workstations and they are all 6 feet apart, but they are still in the presence of each other. They still use the same items in the office. There's high touch surfaces. They could have aerosol sprays from coughs or sneezes that go into the air. And this is very easily spread. And that's why we need to have these cloth masks on. They're not personal protective equipment. They're there to help contain the hazard. So just in case somebody slips through on the screening, they have a mask on and they're not going to be putting the virus out into the air and onto surfaces. So that's been one of the biggest ones that I've had a lot of people with questions and really struggling with, when do they have to wear them and when don't they? If you can completely isolate an employee and they're not in the presence of others, then that's a different story. And the biggest thing I can say to employers is document your plan. And that's another big piece to this training is documenting that you took the training, documenting that you have a plan, and then communicating that plan to all of your employees and making sure they understand it. That's another piece.
So when we started, and just to kind of get more of the macro view of it, when we started, we said that there was a requirement put out by the state that they would have to create a complete AVOSHA training.
Yeah.
And I mentioned that was by May 4th, which has passed us. And let's just maybe hypothetically say there's some businesses out there that haven't done it yet. What does that mean for them? Can they still complete it? I would imagine we're going to go through phases of even allowing people back to work. What does that look like?
So yeah, it was put out that all existing employees that were working, and then all of any businesses that were going to be, the way that I see it, that were going to be open and have employees by May 4th needed to do this training. Anybody that was going to be in a facility, in a workplace, would have had to have had this training. If it didn't get done, there is definitely still time to do it. We have our recorded version that is out on our COVID Resource Center on our website, which is therichardsgrp.com. That's the landing site now. When you go, is a link right to the COVID Resource Center. So you can find the training there, the recorded version. The other thing is just to access the version on VOSHA's website, which is exactly what I go over in the recorded version. I didn't change anything. I just want to take what they want you to know and then give some insight as I'm also an OSHA outreach trainer. And so I do these things all the time and I'm happy to do them and offer kind of insight so that it's a little more in-depth training rather than just reading the slides and kind of feeling lost still. So we try to offer some insight in those. Ways to get it done still. And it's okay. And if your doors aren't open, and you don't have employees in there, this isn't necessarily affecting you right now because it's for when they enter the workplace. So
people can go to the Richards Group website or VOSHA, but I think what we're saying here is that your webinar is a webinar of a webinar with you kind of holding the hand of business owners and employers as you go through that, which I think is terrific and why we wanted you on today. I go through the training. I think it's 55 minutes webinar. Last one I saw. I complete it. I watch it. Then what? Do I take a test? Do I just have to watch it? Do I get a certificate? What does it look? What's the end result?
Yeah. So VOSHA also put together a certification document, which is just a simple fillable PDF, which we also have the link to on our website, along right next to the training. And so after you watch the training, or if you go and just peruse the PDF yourself. You just have to click on that link, fill out the PDF. I will say it's a little tricky. So you have to print that PDF online to a PDF to get it to save your name. Otherwise, you just download the fillable PDF and everybody's getting blank certificates. So that's another big issue I've been solving over the last few weeks is make sure you print the PDF to a PDF to get it to stay. And then just hold on to that for your training records. There's no place to submit them. The state's not asking for these for proof of this at this point. But as with any training record that comes from VOSHA, so if you were doing just your normal safety trainings and you document those things, it's the same concept. Hold on to them in case they're ever requested.
Great. And if I don't, if I don't complete it, is there a policing force? I think you kind of alluded to it, which is, look, put it away in a file for if and when VOSHA would stop in. And I think we've seen even nationwide where many of the authorities and officials are taking this quite seriously, whether that be masks in certain states and having fines for that. What's the regulation around this, and are we doing our due diligence, or is this real? Should we really be doing this?
Yeah, it's real. Because VOSHA mandated it, it's very real. And so I've had that question too a few times, that what if we don't adhere to everything? What if we just decide, to just keep doing what we're doing? It would be the same kind of consequences as it would be to violate any VOSHA mandate, any VOSHA regulation. And so what is happening now is, because there's no specific standard around it, but it is recognized as a hazard, they would cite you under the general duty clause, which is this section of the OSH Act that says you have to create a place that's free from known and recognized hazards for your employees, safety and health hazards. In addition to that, there's things like the PPE standards and the training that goes along with the PPE. There's chemical safety involved now because we have people using chemicals and sanitizing that have never used chemicals before. So there's trainings that have to go in with that. There's respiratory protection. And if you're requiring your employees to wear N95 masks or higher, there's written programs and fit testing and medical evaluations that have to happen with a respiratory program. And also, is it even necessary for them to be wearing respirators at this time during a shortage? Face cloth masks, again, why are they wearing them? How do they wear them? How do they clean them? All of this stuff has to go into that. Gloves, gowns, face protection, eye protection, all requires training. There's OSHA record keeping to think about in this, with if you do have a workplace exposure and it's proven to be a workplace exposure, it's OSHA recordable and could be directly reportable to OSHA as well if it's a hospitalization or if you're unfortunate enough that there's a fatality. But these things are happening across the country. We're seeing cases against Walmart where one store has had a spread and 2 employees die. We're seeing spread in food manufacturing facilities. I'm sure you've heard about the meat packing industries and things that have been going on there, because you're working with animals too, and this virus spreads from animals on top of everything else. So there's just a lot to think about in addition to the VOSHA training. And the VOSHA training goes over that too, and we talk about it in my recorded version about the different things that you need to think about.
So let's stay on employees for a minute, but eventually I want to move over to customers, now walking them into and think of everything from a convenience store, marketplace, to restaurants and lodging. But employees first. We've mentioned some things. Day one, what am I expected to do as an employee? I know you go over some of this in the webinar. So what are some things that we see that are going to be different than where they were in February?
So if you're just coming back in, the first thing employees should know is the plan. And that's a big thing employers too need to make. That's why I say document your plan. Come up, even it doesn't have to be anything complicated. And we have sample plans we're happy to share too with anyone. Just this is the time of crisis. OSHA also has a sample plan on their website. But document that, get it out to the employees so that they can understand what's going to be expected of them, so that they understand when they show up at the door that there's going to be a health screening, that their temperature is going to have to be taken, If they pass that piece, they can come in and do their job, but there's going to be restrictions. And so each employer is going to be different. But the reality is most employees are going to have cloth face masks on for the majority of their day. Break rooms are not going to be the same. It's not going to be hanging out with our friends on break and, the place to go and eat and sit down and rest at this point. I think it's good that Vermont, at first they said no break rooms whatsoever. And I don't think that was very popular. So I'm glad that they put in some rules around that, but you have to, make sure that there's not too many people in your break rooms now. Employees should be prepared to have to wear gloves when they're doing certain things. And it is going to be a different world. And I think it's going to be like this for a while.
I was going to ask, I think we've heard often this is the new normal. Any prediction or insight on it? And I think some of it's here to stay, but I would imagine, I can't imagine actually, that temperature checks, and we'll talk a little bit about that also. Temperature checks are here for 6 months, 2 years, forever.
Yeah, I don't have a good answer for that one. I say 6 months is a reasonable estimate. I think that we would really have to see a long period of time with no new cases popping up, and certainly have vaccines, without a way to stop this from reoccurring. It's just going to keep happening. And I know there's been some new news reports as well that there's all of these new symptoms that we didn't know about, and it seems to be mutating again. There was an article on NPR about that this morning. And it's very weird the way that this is developing. And I feel like every time we gain on it, it changes. And it's tough. I really don't have a good answer for.
Yeah. Well, I don't, if the governor doesn't, I don't expect Shannon. So, but I thought it was worth the ask. Let's pivot over to customers. We've got, we've got some of these quintessential Vermont storefronts here in Bennington and up throughout Manchester, all the way to restaurants and lodging, which I would have to imagine each industry is almost its own certain beast. Restaurants are going to have to reconfigure, and God knows when that's, when inside dining is actually going to open up again, let alone outside dining. What are you seeing in terms of the responsibility of the business owner to accept customers in, and what do you think the expectations of those customers once they're in our shops is going to be?
Because this one is fairly new for Vermont, and they're really one of the first ones to kind of reopen stuff like this. I've been thinking about this a little bit, and it's more on our risk management liability side of things here. So now the public is harder to control. The public is not able, not all store owners feel comfortable policing their customers with this kind of stuff. So it's keeping in mind that it is your business and you are allowed to create the rules around your business the way that you would like and police it as just like no shirt, no shoes, no service, no mask, no service. I think that most people are being pretty reasonable about what's going on and understanding, and want to support those. I would love it, if our little retail shops on my main street could open up and we could get more things in town again, instead of just our grocery stores and pharmacies.
Yeah.
So, and I'm sure there's lots of people, I'm sure people would love to go get their hair cut and do that, but there's safe ways for business owners to go about that. So I think it's more about thinking about how are you going to protect yourselves, your employees, your customers? What's a plan that works for you that does allow you to kind of open up? I was talking to a hair salon yesterday that's going to take one appointment at a time. You have to call before when you get there to make sure that the space is clear before they can, so that they can operate. It's going to be a little bit slower, but at least things are starting to open back up. I think employers just need to, if you're going to open your doors, do it safely, keeping in mind that you could be exposing the public as well at this point, as and vice versa. So there's things to think about that on your liability side. If it were to be traced back to your facility somehow.
What does this do for, as you said, there are other people at the Richards Group that are a little bit more well-versed in insurance. What does this do from insurance, both I think internally and externally?
Insurance is going to be a different world after this too, I think, especially commercial insurance. So, we have some clients that went to a vacant building policy because their buildings aren't being used at this point. We have people that have completely reduced their payrolls. That affects your insurance and your premiums and things. There's things to think about with your workers' comp. Um, because reducing your payrolls on your work comp might sound good right now because it's going to offer some savings on the premiums when we need it. But that could affect your modification factor next year, which could cause a huge increase. So there's things to think about there. And that's why, reach out, talk to us about your specific plan, especially if you're a Richards Group client, because I can help you with your plan, number one. And number two, we want to make sure that we know exactly how you need to be insured right now. And we can also take a look at what moving payrolls and things could do with your workers' comp. A modification factor is like a safety factor that really determines the premium on a work comp. And the higher that factor is, the worse off your premiums are going to be. They're going to go up. And if you have low payrolls and a existing high claim in your history, that mod factor could jump 20 to 30 points, which is like 20 to 30% increase in your premium. So it's good to look at, we can project out and see if we change this is what this would look like. And we're happy to do that.
Yeah. With that in mind, and I want to remind those that are watching on Facebook Live, we've got a couple more questions for Shannon. But if you have any questions, if you're a business owner or just a concerned citizen as it pertains to VOSHA and health requirements and safety, we've got Shannon on here as a subject matter expert. So please leave a comment in our Facebook page on CAT TV, and we will try and get to it. Shannon, talk to me a little bit about the importance of a business continuity plan. What is that? I mean, what does that look like?
So business continuity plans are really important. I think when Irene hit a few years ago, I was actually pretty new to the Richards Group when that happened. And I wasn't really doing this yet, but that was when we saw a surge in companies looking to create business continuity plans. And this is exactly what it's for. It's how do you respond when there is a disaster of some sort that does not enable you to continue operations as normal. And so there might have to be some figuring out of how to get people to work remotely, or do we need to bring in the case of Irene, people are bringing in trailers to work out of and that kind of thing. So that's what a business continuity plan does. It helps you kind of assess all the different types of disasters that could be out there and what your plan is to make sure that you can continue your operations. Unfortunately, I think a lot of businesses still didn't. Maybe we had business continuity in place for natural disaster or cyber breach or something like that, but we weren't focusing on a pandemic. Because, I mean, even myself as a safety and health person, we know about epidemics, we know spreads can happen, but I just never expected to see anything like this. So I think everybody was thrown for a loop, but now's also a good time. It's not too late to put together a continuity plan, and using what you have now and putting these plans together, these action plans, that's a continuity plan. So your response to COVID could be used as a model to kind of respond to other situations as well. But people should be thinking about that. Flood, earthquake, we do have those here.
And I think as a chamber, well, one, as the world turns, people are thinking more and more about safety and health and really tragic things, I think, in general, and impacting a business. And as the chamber, we've tried to encourage people on this time that's been, maybe you haven't had all the hours in the store that you would normally have or in the company. Now is a great time to be building those plans. It's tough to get to that type of strategic thinking, but I think that makes sense. Shannon, just a couple minutes to go. One thing I like to ask all the guests on the show is, how are you handling with stress? What are your tips and tactics? And I think we've got an expert in safety here. So I think, what are you doing? How are you keeping sane in all of this?
Honestly, I've been okay for most of this. This week was a little bit rougher, but I think a lot of it just because my stress personally with my job increased last week with these mandates from Vermont. But for the most part, we're good. We're good here.
That's good.
I'm home with my two daughters, and they are 10 and 13, and they pretty much they're good. They do what they need to do on their own. They understand my job is pretty difficult in these times, so they're pretty good about giving me space to do
They
it.
haven't even popped on the screen yet. So
One did
they're
open
well
the door,
trained.
but I've warned them to, like, if I'm talking, just please shut the door again. You know, I video chats are saving me. Talking with my friends, we certainly have more team meetings, which is nice because I think for me, my job is a very social job. I interact closely with people a lot within our own company as safety director, with a lot of our clients. I'm usually on site with clients working with them and doing tours. So that's been the hardest part for me is I'm a social butterfly and I can't go
Yeah.
and see all of my good clients and friends.
Yeah, you and me both.
Yeah,
It's
I know.
been an interesting time.
Mhm.
I do want to let our members know that are watching this. The chamber recognizes that we're kind of between two points here in the COVID crisis. One was the closure and triage of the crisis. I think we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and so is the governor. So, in that response, in working with the Richards Group, we have launched a campaign really called Southern Vermont Ready. We want to help our business members get ready. Part of that is the VOSHA training. Part of that is we've had both donations and for purchase PPE for our businesses. So if you head on over right now to the chamber website, swbtchamber.com / Southern Vermont Ready, there will be everything from PPE being offered both by Orvis, by some, and they're making the facial masks. We have a partnership with J.K. Adams where they're making shields and some other partnerships with hand sanitizers and the like. We're working on thermometers, which it sounds like will be important as we check people's temperature. But stay tuned from this chamber with those kind of things. I think we view our next role in the reopening of the Southern Vermont economy is being a partner with our members. So as Shannon mentioned, we want to be right there with you, helping you get the supplies you need, help you get the training you need, help to understand the policies that are being passed down from the state. And so all that's available on our website. Again, check that out. Shannon, anything else before we go that you would like to mention or we didn't get to today?
I do. I have two things. So you mentioned thermometers, which has been another hot topic. That's not really a pun or joke there, but they put that mandate out, said if feasible, take their temperatures. And what that meant was if you have a thermometer now that is no touch, then go ahead and start using it. They clarified that. They, at this point, all employers should attempt to get a thermometer or have thermometers in place, orders in place. And so and I'm sure as a chamber you'd agree to reach out to your local pharmacies because they can definitely help you source those things. I know the pharmacy in your area has reached out to me to let me know that she has thermometers and she would love to help local businesses. So there's, one that has reached out to me personally. The other piece to this is we are not, we understand that there's more to come on this. So there will likely be more webinars from us. We also have a webinar scheduled next Wednesday at 10 a.m., which I'm going to get info out. Myself and our Vice President of Property and Casualty, Peter Richards, will be doing a webinar about returning work and reopening your doors, a checklist basically of the insurance side of things that you should be thinking about, and then the employee safety side. And so I'll be talking more about the VOSHA requirements again, not the full training, but just kind of simmered down piece to say, here's some bullets of things that you should be getting done.
Great. And we will be sure to partner with the Richards Group and you, Shannon, to get that out to our members so they can all attend. And again, I would recommend remind them of the website to go to if they would like to watch that 55-minute VOSHA / the Richards Group webinar and get certified sooner than later. So what's that website they can go to?
So if you just go to therichardsgrp.com, that will open right up to our statement about us being closed. But if you scroll down a little, you'll see a link to the COVID Resource Center, and you just click that and it'll bring you right in. There's all sorts of really helpful links from all of our business units on there. So things to think about, from investments to employee benefits, HR consulting, commercial insurance, personal insurance, all sorts of stuff. So it's a good center.
Terrific. Well, we so appreciate having a partner like the Richards Group and you, Shannon, with us here in this county as well as all of Vermont. So thank you so much for joining us today on the telecast. And just one more reminder for everybody, a reminder that it's Mother's Day this weekend. So if you haven't yet, make sure you get your order in to do something for Mom, and at the very least, give her a call. We want to thank all the mothers and everybody else who tuned in today. Thank you, Shannon, for joining us, and hope everybody has a great weekend. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.